I'm going to talk about how to be effective for good in times that feel really bad. Earlier today, I posted about how to not lose your shit when the world feels crazy. And this video is going to be a practical next kind of step to that. It's going to be longer. Just a heads up. It'll be worth it for those who need to hear this. While I was working out this afternoon, I started thinking about how we tend to empathize with victims of injustice by putting ourselves in their shoes and imagining and feeling what they're going through and being outraged or devastated on their behalf. We've seen so many horrifying acts of injustice, sends shockwaves. We feel rage and we feel grief. These waves just flood our nervous system. Sometimes it just feels like, well, what else is there? What else can we do? We don't want to feel nothing. We don't want to be complicit by not feeling or ignoring it. I want to make a really important distinction here. Hear me closely. Imagining suffering and feeling it as an act of solidarity is not the answer. If you want to combat injustice, you can't dive into the bloody pool of pain and sorrow. You have to stay on solid ground. You have to use your strength effectively instead of diving in and just flailing around in this cesspool of injustice. Putting yourself in the shoes of someone who is suffering and feeling pain on their behalf is not the way to help them. I'm going to start by telling you my experience of nearly losing my children in a custody battle. In 2012, I left my husband and the father of my kids. I was pretty naive. I thought that I could just rent a bedroom down the street and save us, just draw a line in the sand for myself and save us unnecessary pain and costs for lawyers. What I didn't understand was that by leaving him, I just opened the throttle on his abusive behavior. I had no idea what I was in for and how much worse it would get. Long story short, he accused me of child abuse. For 18 months, I didn't have custody of my 1 and 2-year-old. The first time we went before a judge who was presiding over the case, she told me that I did not stand a chance. And then every time I showed up to another hearing after that, it just made her angrier and angrier. I don't know why she disliked me so much. I do know that every time she saw my face, it made it worse.
Her contempt for me was almost palpable, which is incredibly scary when this person holds the power to strip you of your rights to raise your children.
That's what I was experiencing for 18 months. I'm not going to go into all the crazy details. Will say that living with that tension and unknowing, it just does something profound to you. I felt utterly insane. It felt like the whole world was carrying on like normal and I was living in a nightmare that was real life. I just can't put into words. Part of me, I just had this quiet hysteria all the time. I also understood that I had to not act like I was being crushed by what I was being crushed by, because I had to make sure that I looked responsible and that I didn't look like a crazy person. Living in a crazy situation and trying to not act like it's crazy on top of it because you're afraid of losing your kids, just the levels of mindfuck are just beyond words, honestly. Everything I did, there was a sense of paranoia because if I didn't show emotion, it looked like I didn't care. If I did show emotion, people thought I was unstable, or that was the fear. I had to go to work, but sometimes I was literally on the verge of a panic attack. And sometimes I really just did have panic attacks. And just this quiet hysteria is all I can say. It just was my ever-present companion. And I was bewildered by how many people who I considered friends reacted in ways I didn't expect. There's this like quiet distance that grows when people just don't know what to say or how to process. They just carefully back away. You just realize that no one is going to save you. Now, I did have incredible moments of grace and real miracles. So that is true. That is a different topic that I want to address today. It really just the human experience of profound devastation. I honestly felt trapped alive. Like I couldn't commit suicide because that would have been giving in voluntarily to what I was suffering from, the not ability to the losing my children. There were so many times that I would have wished to have had like terminal diagnosis, because at least then I could have made peace with there's an end in sight. But this just felt like such an uncertain tension and feeling of just being trapped alive, honestly, because it felt crushing and I had to act like I wasn't crushed by it. So I'm gonna just trust that gives you a little bit of context and just a glimpse of the anguish and despair and paranoia that just become this like merry-go-round of emotions, like this hellscape. And so what happened for me and what happens for many people is at some point you break.
In my case, this wasn't like a momentary thing. It was like a process.
I suddenly realized that I was breaking. I broke from the belief that I couldn't carry on. I broke from the belief that I couldn't live if other people believed I was guilty of something that couldn't make them take my children away. I broke with the belief that I couldn't live if their father was so malicious that he would rather have the children have no mother than one that was not under his control. All the anguish that had felt like a part of me, I broke with somehow. It just became unbearable when that happened. You realize that this breaking process is actually like a breakthrough, because you had so identified with the experience. When you break from it, you realize that those experiences are not you. They are monstrous and they are disruptive. They're not you. There is a measure of freedom and of grace in that. It's just a tweak in perspective that has incredibly powerful impact over time. Over time, I have navigated really intense things that people would have seemed, even when I look back on them, they seem like they were soul crushing. It's not just that you have resilience and strength. There's a measure of steadiness that even doesn't require strength when you're not identified with this suffering. It takes the extreme of the suffering to get to that place, which I was thinking about that because that is how the initiates in the last video I made, they were forced to have these extreme emotional experiences until something broke and they were no longer controlled by them. I guess I was realizing that that's what happened for me. The people that imagined themselves in my shoes and were overcome by the experience, they didn't end up being the ones that were helpful, because they found it overwhelming and they ended up quietly stepping away or coming up with a story to make it make sense. A lot of times that story was, maybe she is guilty. Maybe she did something to deserve this. Maybe there's something I don't know. And so that putting themselves in my shoes was not what was helpful. Feeling the weight of my pain did not make them helpful. Here's what I know from having lived really on the edge of sanity and grief. This is part of the human experience. None of us are guaranteed a life without suffering. It can be really arbitrary. I will never know why that judge hated me so much. By the way, spoiler, or just to let you know, she's also the one that gave me sole custody in the end. Sole custody. I'm glad I hung in there. And she honestly didn't really have a choice but to give me custody of my children because the facts came to the surface, came to light. Coming back to what I've learned, suffering is inevitable. It can be arbitrary. None of us have any reason to believe that we're exempt. Making peace with that as a part of the human experience is a really important first step if you ever want to be helpful to anyone else. I have some notes here that I want to keep myself on track. If you don't make peace with the idea of suffering being a part of the human experience, then you end up being one of the people who quietly backs away or makes up a story to make it make sense. That's not helpful. Again, accepting suffering as a fact of life, not assuming that anyone is exempt, is really important. Scrolling through people's pain and letting it wreck your nervous system is not helpful. These are not the ways to make a difference in the world. Here are some facts. We are a part of the animal kingdom. We are a part of nature. When you think about the animal kingdom, it's a brutal one. I don't know if you've ever seen a nature documentary that is graphic or Nature is Metal Instagram. I see those videos sometimes and they're pretty horrific. That's the animal kingdom. We're a part of it. If we're a part of that, your first reaction is, hey, wait a second, but we're humans, we're evolved. That's true. What makes us evolved is our frontal cortex, the part of our brain that gives us our executive function, our meaning making, our language, our humanity is based on our frontal cortex. The emotions, the powerful emotions, that's part of the animal kingdom. If we want to differentiate ourselves from the rest of the animal kingdom, we have to use our frontal cortex. We have to use our executive function. We have to use our ability to make meaning, to use reason and logic, not be bathing in these primal emotions. It's not that the emotions are bad, it's just that they're here. We need to let them inform our ability to use the part of our brain that separates us from the animal kingdom. We need to let these powerful emotions inform our values, inform our communication, inform our choice and our decision making and our forecasting and our planning, not just bathe in the primal experience of these animalistic emotions. I hope this is making sense. I just want to reiterate that if we want to differentiate ourselves from the rest of the animal kingdom, then if we want to differentiate ourselves from the senseless violence and the just grotesque experience of the animal kingdom in this primal state, we have to use the part of our brain that differentiates us from the rest of the animal kingdom. We have to use our ability to communicate and our ability to make decisions and align our values with the choices that we make and let our emotions inform them, because that is where the real potential of our species comes into play and makes us different from the rest of the animal kingdom. Knowing what we don't want, when we encounter the things we don't want, they should be a resounding reminder of what we do want, that we refocus our attention on the values we hold, the things that we are committed to, the future we want to create, the community we love. We always have to guide ourselves back using our ability to function with our reason and communicate effectively according to our values. It really comes down to, you can't be effective, you can't make a difference in the world if you can't manage your own inner world. If you can't govern and look after and maintain a state of equilibrium in here, you can't make a difference in the world, or not one that's helpful. If you think, well, I want to really go do something, what can you do if you can't manage your own inner world? Yeah, that's basically what I have to say. I can't be any more blunt than this. If you can't manage the status of your inner world as an assignment, then you aren't ready for an assignment in the outer world. When you learn to keep your shit together and learn how to care without being wrecked, you will naturally influence the world around you in greater and greater ways. That is the starting place, is taking responsibility for our inner world, clarifying our values, and letting our emotions inform our reason, inform our decision making, becoming someone who can remain steady in the middle of chaos. That's how we start. That's how we approach making a difference.